What is art? When you first hear this question, the first thing that may come to mind are paintings, or what some people just normally call art. Van Gogh, Da Vinci, Dali, Banksy, all of these people have become household, instantly recognizable names. Even people who have no clue about what art is can instantly recognize the Mona Lisa or Starry Night. But what else is art? What defines art as a medium, as a concept? Many consider music, dance, theater, and cinema to be forms of art. But why? What definition constitutes that these forms of entertainment are art and others are not? Where do you draw the line between what is art and what isn't? The answer, well, there really isn't one. You can go online and search up what is art all you want, but you won't find a constituent solution. Most people say that art is an expression, but how do you define what an expression is? If I buy a block of wood from Home Depot and say that is a metaphor for the class divide in the United States, is that art? I don't know. So whenever I make a claim that Control, the 2019 video game by Remedy Studios, is a work of art, how do I back that claim up? What makes Control a work of art and other games not? Well, there are other games out there that I would consider to be art, but I believe that Control is the best example of how video games can be interpreted as an art form. To claim that a video game is a work of art is, not surprisingly, a pretty controversial statement. As soon as the first real, story-driven video games arrived on shelves, conversation spurred about whether or not The Legend of Zelda could be compared to something like Schindler's List. Famous movie critic Robert Ebert once said that no one in or out of the field has ever been able to cite a game worthy of comparison with the great poets, filmmakers, and novelists. The argument is somewhat split down the middle, with some claiming that Wolfgang Mozart ain't got nothing on GTA, and others believing that video games can never compare to the common conception of high art. Since video games can't be specifically defined as being art, many try to compare it to the closest medium that is commonly accepted to be an art form: cinema. Video games and movies share a surprising amount of similarities. Both have a narrative comprised of a definite start, middle, and end, which is told through visuals and a written script. Both forms have a similar production process requiring a large team of scriptwriters, directors, and actors. However, the main difference between video games and movies is interactivity. When you watch a movie, you act as a passenger on the journey that the characters go through, but in a video game, you are the main character. You control each and every action that the protagonist goes through, and rather than having the story progress around you, you progress the story. After hearing this, you may think, if that's the case, then yeah, video games are definitely art. But according to most critics, that's not enough. And this is where Control separates itself from the average video game. Control shares the same qualities as most video games and movies, but the reason why it's so different from other games is because its closest similar art form is not cinema, but architecture. Now, I'm sure that Control is not the first game, nor will it be the last, to emphasize architecture in its world building, but in my opinion, it by far does it the best. Control takes place in its entirety in a building called the Oldest House. The structure acts as the home for a secret government agency meant to contain and study paranormal anomalies, known as the Federal Bureau of Control. So it would only make sense that the developers designed the Oldest House using one of the most menacing and evil architectural styles: brutalism. Brutalism is a form of architecture originating back in 1950s Europe. These style of buildings are easily recognizable due to their large, blocky, concrete structure. Brutalism is usually associated with the Soviet Union, as they were relatively easy and cheap to construct. Due to their strange design, however, these types of buildings come off as kind of intimidating. But why bring this up? Well, when you have a game like Control, which takes place entirely inside of a somewhat inherently evil building that houses a secret government agency that contains the paranormal, you can't just coat that with some nice pretty walls that say, "Come on in." Remedy was very intentional with how the Oldest House was going to look, and, more importantly, how it feels. Each room inside the house is huge and extremely menacing. The walls rise high above the main character Jesse, sometimes going up into nothingness. While some rooms look like normal office spaces, others, not so much. This aesthetic combined with the hyper-realistic graphics, textures, and mechanics that Remedy designed, makes the entire environment of the oldest house feel that much more interactive. Reflections are cast upon the newly polished floor. Large chunks of concrete can be torn off the walls and turned into a shield or a flying projectile to launch at your enemies. The architecture in Control flows and matches perfectly with the aesthetic and gameplay. But for now, let's ignore all other aspects of Control and focus solely on the environments. In my opinion, Control is one of the only games to treat architecture the same way that movies treat animation. For movies, animation acts as a way to create scenes that would never be possible to make in real life. Take, for example, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Sure, with a little bit of CGI, the plot of that movie could be easily converted into a live-action movie, but scenes like this, or this, wouldn't be possible to recreate in real life without sacrificing the aesthetic of the movie. Control takes the same approach, but for architecture. Even some of the most famous architects, Frank Lloyd Wright, Antoni Gaudí, and Frank Gehry, to name a few, wouldn't be able to recreate the rooms found within the oldest house. Some rooms are too big or ambitious to be reasonably recreated in real life, while others simply defy the laws of physics. Each and every room in Control acts as a look into an architect's sketchbook, whereas in a sketchbook, an architect's absurd and unreasonable ideas only exist in the form of 2D drawings. In Control, these concepts are fully fleshed out, explorable places. The oldest house acts as a physical manifestation of the architect's subconscious, where physics and logic aren't a restraint. Control is proof of how far we can push architecture and, as a matter of fact, any art form by using video games. You know, it really is upsetting to see how little representation video games receive in the art world. I mean, I'm not one to say gamers are oppressed, but the amount of elitism that exists among art critics has devalued the hard work and care that goes into these games. Since video games hold this stigma of being associated with laziness and introvertedness, most critics are more than hesitant to claim that this medium can produce works that can be held to the same standard as other forms of high art. However, I don't think that all hope is lost. Ever since that blog post by critic Roger Ebert declaring that video games are not and cannot be an art form, more and more people have been speaking out about the subject, and the growing consensus is that yes, video games are art. I think that as long as more games like Control are produced, games that push boundaries and redefine the medium, then yes, there will be a time where we can all agree that video games are art. I just wanted to use this opportunity to thank all of you guys for supporting my channel so much. This video took me a couple of weeks to research, write, and edit, and if I'm going to be honest, your support is a huge reason why I continue to make these videos. I know I'm a small channel, but every like or comment really helps and supports me. Thank you for supporting the channel, and thanks for watching.